Good morning and welcome once again to the home studio. In several of my OLight reviews, I've made comments to the effect that I don't use OLights in my boots on the ground search and rescue loadout, and the reason is because the magnetic charging interferes with compass navigation. I've also made several statements about how I often navigate without using map, compass, or GPS, and I almost never use GPS for navigation. This has led to some questions and possibly some misconceptions that somehow I'm trying to diss GPS, I'm trying to diss OLight, and that's simply not the case. In fact, right here I'm holding one of my favorite lights, which is the Baton 3, and I'll be using this in a demonstration. I've been asked numerous times to illustrate what am I talking about when I'm talking about interfering with compass navigation. I've mentioned many times I need to do a video on this, so this is the video. In the next chapter, I'm going to talk very briefly about exactly how I do land navigation and all the tools and techniques that I use. Then I'll show you a couple of the compasses that I actually use in the field, and then we'll get to the demonstration. All right, how do I navigate out in the field? Some people think this is, well, you just use one device, you use a compass or you use GPS or some other means and that's it. I actually use what I call a layered strategy, and it looks like this. Most used to least used. This would be primitive or natural land navigation. This is distance and bearing, and this is GPS. I could probably say in a very general setting that as you move up this scale, reliability has a tendency to decrease, but accessibility has a tendency to increase. Very quickly, what do I mean by that? Okay. Primitive land navigation is everything that nature offers me, as well as man-made constructions like a communication or a radio tower or a hill with a large water tower on top. This is everything that nature has to offer on the ground, up in the sky, sun, stars, planets, etc. That's all information. It's highly reliable information that's always going to be there. Is that radio tower going to disappear in 5 or 6 hours while I'm out in the field? Well, if it does, I have bigger problems to deal with than navigation. So that's very reliable information. It's not subject to battery running out or anything of that nature, but it's not always accessible. Let's say I'm in a dense area of trees. Let's say I'm out at the sand dunes in Monahans, Texas. Let's say I'm in the middle of the jungle. What information do I have around me to differentiate to the point that I can determine position and direction? Pretty much nothing. But on the other hand, let's say I am at the sand dunes in Monahans. Would I be able to get accurate compass readings? Would I have accessibility to GPS in a wide open area like that? Yeah, I shouldn't have any trouble getting satellite locked. So each of these things provides me with something different. I tend to use these two the most. I rely the heaviest on what is around me in terms of landmark and terrain features. Distance and bearing, I measure distance with pace count. I know a lot about my pace count. I keep up with paces over long distances using ranger beads, and the bearing part is where compass navigation comes in. Now, do I use GPS? Well, if I didn't, I wouldn't have this on the strap of my ruck. This is a Garmin InReach Explorer Plus. Now, this is used primarily for tracking so that people on my team, Incident Command, can get pings every 10 minutes on my position. But there are instances where GPS can be very valuable, especially with modern technology like Apple Watches, the new iPhone 14. People are in distress, and the information that we get from their devices is GPS coordinates. So I can use GPS to determine an initial direction, but I still use it in tandem with all of this other information. So I don't want to have anything in my loadout that would cause any of these to break down. So since I use these two the most, anything that might interfere with compass navigation is a big deal to me. Now on that subject, in the next chapter, I'm going to show you a couple of the compasses that I use, then I'll show you some interference examples. The primary compass that I use is this Lensatic from CMMG. Anybody who knows what a DD214 is has probably either seen or used one of these. So this is something that I use to shoot a very precise azimuth. And I'm recording all of this information, not only azimuths in the direction I'm heading, but back azimuth for the return path in an ingress map. So these readings are extremely critical. Just being off 1 degree over the course of a few miles could put me outside of line of sight of what I'm looking for. Now for very approximate direction, I carry this orienteering compass in a knife pocket. This is something I can just hold out in front of me, red in the shed, and all I'm doing is trying to get an idea of, I know I'm supposed to be heading pretty much northwest, okay? If I'm heading this way and northwest is in that direction, I'm good. If I'm heading this way and northwest is in that direction, then I've made a critical error that needs to be resolved. So I do carry some other compasses, but at the minimum, I will have these two on me every outing. All right, let's get to the star of the show. What causes interference and how bad can it be? Okay, I'm filming this handheld, so bear with me. I have the two compasses at opposite ends of the little table. There is a bunch of metal in my office, and you'll notice that if you look at these, this one is pointing to a slightly different direction from north. The CMMG tends to be a bit more tolerant of metal interference. This is an accurate reading. This is already off a little, but I have a bunch of metal and other flashlights and headlamps and stuff over in this direction. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this one. I'm going to watch as I move it closer to the other compass. See? Just moving it next to the metal of the compass. Now they're both getting interference just from having two compasses too close together. Now let me move this back out to where it's reading consistently, it's in a steady state. I'm going to reach back here, get my Baton 3, and just moving it in the vicinity of that compass is already making it go crazy. And of course, it's just as bad with this one. So, having something with this magnetic charging too close can significantly affect your reading. So that's why I don't have anything like this in my loadout. But this also brings up a point. I talk a lot about compass navigation and reliability. You can get into areas where there is compass interference. So I'm going to close with just a quick hint. And this is where GPS can in fact be helpful, because all three tiers of navigation should support one another. they should confirm one another, so they serve as checks and balances. I was out in the field once, and I just took one of these quick readings, and I was on top of this mound. I didn't know that the mound was a former dump. There's a bunch of metal underneath me, and so I got a quick indication of direction. It's one of these indications where, I think I should be moving in this direction, and then I take a compass reading. It says I should be moving over here. And so what you can do is you can start walking around with your compass, and as you move around, you should get a consistent direction for north. If you don't, and that compass needle starts spinning wildly, then you know you're in an area where there is magnetic interference. But that needle should be constantly moving back and forth and pointing in a consistent north direction. I could talk for another 15 or 20 minutes on how to use all of these navigational techniques together, how to compensate for the failures of one. I will close and just say that in terms of compass reliability versus GPS reliability, I've only been in like one or two instances where there was compass interference. I was able to use natural land nav to get around that. I've actually helped about 20 or 22 people out at the LBJ grasslands, and I'd say about 15 of them have two things in common. They all have a map and they have a handheld GPS. Now, some of it was not GPS. There were instances where they lost satellites, they had signal problems. There were also issues with the way that they use GPS. And so there's the correct way to use a compass. There's a correct way to use a handheld GPS device. There are compensations and techniques that you need to pay attention to out in the field. If that's something you're interested, then leave a comment and I will make a complete video on that. But I just wanted to show in hopefully a somewhat short video what types of navigation I use, how all the navigational techniques fit together, and why I try to avoid having anything magnetic in my search and rescue loadout. As always, thank you for your time and thank you for watching the video.